I'll shut up now.
Okay. Our speaker tonight, James Wheat, is the new compiler for the Jacksonville Christmas bird count. He's a longtime Duval County resident. He first participated on the St. Augustine and Jacksonville CBCs in the 1976-77 CBC season. He would later be compiler for the St. Augustine CBC for many years before relocating to Kentucky in mid-2014. James is also compiler for the Louisville, Kentucky CBC and is the regional editor for the 42 CBCs held in Kentucky each year. He is engaged in several historical eBird projects, including some in Duval, bird surveys, works with the Merlin team, and is an eBird hotspot reviewer. And he provided some links that I'll also paste into the chat for everybody, but these links are some of his recommended links for CBC participants and anybody to view. Helpful links. All right, and with that, James, I will stop sharing my intro and you can start sharing your program.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I am going to, here we go. All right. I need to move these, the pictures of people because they covered up some of my cheat sheet notes. So I want to thank you all for being here to listen to me yammer about several topics about which I'm very passionate. Christmas bird counts are the first topic that I'm going to talk about, specifically Jacksonville. We're going to talk about eBird trip reports. I'm not going to dig too deeply in that because that's something that you really need to just get in and play with. But we'll talk a little bit about that, some of their features and benefits, and a website called Birding Hotspots that I really want to try to get the word out on that, and we'll talk about that for a bit. But I'm really thrilled to be the compiler for the Jacksonville CBC. As Pete mentioned, I've participated in this CBC since 76, 77. I've missed only a handful of years. I blame my daughter's births for examples, but for a long stretch, I was one of the guys on the boat party. I mean, for years and years, me and Bob Richter would get out on the boat and freeze and be salty wet all day long. But I've had one of my most sublime birding experiences in my life was on a Jacksonville CBC when Bob and I were offshore. We went out past the jetties and cut north a little bit, turned off the engine over a school of fish while there had to have been 100 gannets feeding, diving all around us. And I am never going to forget that. That was just an absolute sublime, amazing experience to just be there with them, just dropping in quietly with Olympic diver splashes, but noisy exits of the water with their food. Anyway, I talk a lot, so I hope the links that I've provided will help if you really want to dig down into some of the topics that I'm going to mention. One of them is an hour-long video of a Zoom meeting of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology when they introduced trip reports. So, fair warning, you may not want to sit through the whole thing. I was on that meeting and it was substantive and good, but anyway.
James,
yes.
Real quick, we're seeing, at least I'm seeing your notes screen and not the full slideshow.
Well, there we go. How about that?
That's better.
All right, thank you for that. All right. All right. So let me try one other thing, because that means I'm going to have to look over here to make sure that I say, oh, I'll just look over there. Who cares? So I'm going to introduce, the introduction to FLJA, which is the Audubon code for the Jacksonville CBC, Florida, obviously FLJA Jacksonville, and FLSA is St. Augustine, and you can consider the others. But there's some interesting tidbits about the Jacksonville count that I want to just sort of review. So the Christmas bird count this year is going to be the 89th one run in Jacksonville. Now, 77 of those are consecutive. If any of you who are doing the quick math, you can realize that World War II sort of put the kibosh on the CBCs in most of the country during those years. I mean, there were some people who did them in some spots, but a lot of them, just didn't run. But this is going to be year 89. The first one was Christmas Day in 1910. And on that CBC, there were 31 species observed, 171 birds. The information about what's the name of the people and how many were there is not available. I looked, but that's true for a lot of those real early CBCs. Last year, we had 160 species in Duval, 14,000 plus birds. So you can see that's a giant difference. The average species for the 89 counts is 139 species, but because their early counts were sporadic, from 1910 through the mid 1940s, the average species of the past 25 years, as you can see, jumps up to 160. And that's because in the last 25 years, better optics, better bird guides, and certainly more connection between people, especially in the last 10 years with eBird and social media and smartphones and dumb phones and things like that. So the total species count for Jacksonville, 290 species have been detected on Christmas bird counts in Duval County. There's a I don't want to get too picayune, but I got that number by consolidating a couple of things where, like, for example, early on, there was question about whether the eastern screech owl was different from the western screech owl, and it turned out that it is. So a lot of the early screech owls on the Christmas bird counts, not just in Florida, but elsewhere, was screech owl species. And so I just assumed that all those were legit screech owls that we would normally see these days. So the longest time since certain species have been seen, the longest droughts of Jacksonville birds. So the purple gallinule was seen 91 years ago. So if anybody sees one, you're going to have a noted bird. Cliff swallow 72 years ago. Purple martin 70 years ago. Ring-necked pheasant actually 70 years ago. I mean, in fairness, that one was probably a game farm release, a hunting preserve type release. We get a lot of that stuff up here in Kentucky. Chuckers and a few other things will occasionally show up, but that's just because people like to release them and shoot them. And a red-cockaded woodpecker was seen in Jacksonville 62 years ago. So those are the fun bits. One other thing I'll mention is that I don't know this certainly, because I'm trying to convince Audubon to do a land use study on the land use composition of all the Christmas bird count circles. I've done that for all of the CBCs in Kentucky, and but I think I feel fairly sure that Jacksonville has among the most tidal marsh areas of all of the Florida CBCs, if not the top. And that's pretty good. And one of the reasons I bring up that point is because with that fact in mind, I'm hoping to inspire people who realize that you can't get a lot of birding done in tidal marshes when your feet are dry, that we need to try to get people who are in boats in some of these estuaries and some of the tidal streams and stuff to count some of the birds that's in there. One of the examples that come to mind is I had a recent conversation with Bill Prantey, the regional editor for Kentucky. I'm sorry, for Florida, and Pat Leary, who used to be the boat guy in the Nassau edge of the Count Circle in Jacksonville, where there were over 100 seaside, over 100 Nelson, and over 100 salt marsh sparrows. And Prantey was like, "Oh, come on." And Pat Leary was like, "Dude, when you're out there in the salt marsh and the tide comes up, they're all just," and he showed a picture that had like 30 birds in it, 30 of the marsh sparrow species in one section of Spartina. And it was just jaw-dropping for me anyway. So I mentioned that in hopes that some people will be inspired to get in their canoes, kayaks, john boats, bass boats, motorboats on the CBC and spend part of the day, looking at the tide. Of course, it's going to depend on how the tide is. So, but I thought that was a point worth mentioning. So, who's a compiler? What does a compiler do? In sum, the compiler's job is to make sure that the count circle is covered adequately, from a geographic standpoint, from a personnel standpoint, and from a bird species and bird count standpoint. So if you have too few people, like that's a big problem I have up here in Kentucky, is I have a lot of Christmas bird counts that have fewer than 10 participants. And that means that in order to cover the whole area, people have to zoom around a lot, and you don't detect birds as easily when you're driving around in a car as you do when you're on foot walking a trail. And so that's why I'm really trying to, increase the number of participants. And that's why in my communications with the section leaders here for this Christmas bird count coming up in Jacksonville is to try to make sure that we have enough people to spread it out. And so the other things, outside of encouraging participation, working with the section leaders to make sure that they've got everything organized, to make sure that all the good spots are covered, in the morning time, so that the afternoon can be clean up, mop up, or popping into some extra spots. The compiler will, at the end of the CBC, collect all that data, the effort information, the species list, trip reports, and whatnot, and compile it into one master list that includes things like weather and precipitation, wind, sky conditions, number of birds per species, any rare bird documentation, the effort information, what time did everybody start, how many parties were there, what time did everybody finish, and all that kind of fun stuff. Uploaded into the portal, which is a kind of an old school database that Audubon has that they're working on replacing soon. And just input all that data so that at that point, the compiler's job is done, and it's the regional editor's job to go in and audit every one of the Florida CBCs. That's what Bill and Bruce Anderson do, is they audit every page of every Christmas bird count. So that's why the compiler's job is they're going to be, I'm going to be after you for details of rare birds, especially on count day. And the reason for that is that a lot of people, if you write down your notes contemporaneously, it's they're more reliable than if I reach out a couple days later and say, "Hey, you saw there was a Western kingbird on my intro screen. How did you know it was a Western kingbird and not a, anything else?" But the count circle, let's get to that. Count circle is a 15-mile diameter circle. And this is the Jacksonville count circle. And you can see the center point there, the yellow circle with the bird on it. But this is what the count circle is. In past years, the way it was done was people people use topographic maps usually with a circle compass. You guys remember that from elementary school? I do too, and there was always a hole in the middle of the page because that's where the anchor point was. And but I've still got the CBC map that Peggy Powell had from, you know, the 1800s from the Jacksonville CBC, and it's like 50th generation photocopied. But the good thing is these days we can use digital technology to render exact 7.5 mile radius circles like this one. And one of the links that I provided is Audubon's ArcGIS website, which has all of the CBCs, digital renderings of the CBCs. And that's what the screenshot is from. I added the red just for emphasis because the one on the map is black and it was a little harder to see and it was thinner. So I wanted to just make the point that this is what the count circle looks like. And it was placed back in the day to take advantage of the physiographic features of Northeast Florida. So it's obviously the intercoastal, the river, the barrier islands, a little bit of the ocean, the tidal marsh, and it's the brackish, you know, habitats. And so that's the reason that it was posted this way. And to my knowledge, it has always been this one center point. So this is what it looks like. And then here is a map. I think Pete did this map a little more than a decade ago, but this is how we've got it divided up, and this is how it's historically been divided up. And you know, everybody is assigned there's a section leader for each of the 9. You'll notice that there's 10 on here, which I'm hoping if anybody has any boat captains who might be willing to take out a couple of birders to cover that area offshore and off of the jetties there. Part of the reason is obviously because there's a possibility of pelagic species, but also in years past, I remember, you know, having a scope and not being able to see the great cormorants or the harlequin ducks that were way out at the end of the jetties that people in boats could see, but I couldn't. And so I think that, I mean, I've also been out there and seen the razorbills in 2012. So there's benefit to having a boat out there. You can see things that people inland aren't going to be able to see with their scopes or see reliably because you've got the heat shimmer and the wind shaking your scope and all that kind of good stuff. True, in the boat, you're bouncing around, but you can usually get in proximity to birds where, you know, you can get a decent look. Anyway, I just want to point out that section 1 is New Berlin, and Leslie Royce is the section lead. Number 2 is Skip Whitford's Yellow Bluff area. Deb Hill has Black Hammock. Ann Turner has this little snaky thing called Heckscher Drive here in the middle. Bill George has Fort George Island because Fort George is named after him. And Laura Johansson has Talbot Islands, number 6. 7 is over here as Jay Kaufman is on Mayport. Kelly Berkey is now taking over, and thanks to Kelly, she's the new section lead for Fort Caroline, and Pat Murphy is working Arlington. So I'm real happy that we've got solid and experienced people doing all of that role, and they have teams that I can't say I know this, but I'm hoping that they've got teams that have been participating in their sections for quite some time. And one of the benefits of having the same group cover the same area for the CBC is that consistency and familiarity means more reliable results and more consistent results over time. So let's see where we're going to go next. We're going to talk a little bit about birding on a CBC. And by the way, these photos are mine for the most part, except for the screenshots. So this is my best of me in advance of next month's Duval. I get to sneak in some shots. So the first thing is obviously counting the birds. But I want to emphasize that there is a difference between birding and doing a CBC. And that is that a CBC is a scientific protocol and has certain requirements. And part of the requirements that makes it different from just regular birding is that the birding has to be tracked by the mileage, and the time has to be tracked by mode of transportation. And I sort of alluded to it a moment ago, where if you're on foot birding, your bird detectability is going to be a lot higher than it is if you're zooming from one hotspot to the next and you see a red tail on a power line or a power pole. So Audubon, in all the years of their 125 years, by the way, this is the 125th CBC season upcoming. They sort of have algorithms that tabulate the detection rates for those different measures. But that is one of the biggest challenges that the section leaders and the compilers have, is making sure people understand how to track the time and distance on foot, separate from in a car, separate from in a golf cart, kayak. Up here in Kentucky, I get people who are in horse and buggies on their CBCs, and those folks are good birders. And so that's one of the big differences. Yeah, I didn't advance because I got talking, I didn't advance my bullets, but the other thing that's different is that usually when you go birding, you go to a particular hotspot, you see what's there and stuff. But for the Christmas bird count, in each of the sections that I showed on the previous slide, one of the goals is to try to cover as much of the area as possible, because it isn't just going to the hotspots. It does include going to the hotspots, but it's not only going to the hotspots. And sometimes that's not possible to do a thorough covering of the whole section, because there's a lot of private property. There's a lot of restricted areas, Blunt Island, Mayport, that you have to have special permission to go on. So, but covering the whole section is an important thing that's a little bit different from everyday birding. The other thing is that when you're in a section that's on the outside, you have to mind where the arc of the circle is, because you can't count any birds outside the circle. So if you happen to be at the edge of the count circle and your back is to the middle of the count circle, and you see a thermal that's got 6 turkey vultures, black vulture or 2, and a red tail, you can't count it because it's outside the circle. Now, generally speaking, people aren't super hard about that, because thermals move and the birds could float across the CBC. But I just admonish people to pay attention to what's inside the circle, and especially if it's something rare and it's outside the circle, people are just, man, we got to count it. So I'm not saying that Audubon as a rule has been super meticulous about this, like there's an invisible wall that it protects the count circle. But I especially want to make sure people don't spend a lot of time in hotspots that aren't in the circle. There is a difference between the digital circle and the old school circle that included, for example, some properties around University. The circle is a little further away from the river on that north-south University Boulevard piece of the edge of the landmass. And so I've talked to all of the people whose areas are around there, and we've gotten that sorted. But another thing is that there are people who want to participate in the Christmas bird count who might live in the count circle but aren't as ambulatory as others, and they may just want to watch their feeders. And so there is a certain protocol for watching bird feeders. It's not only for the CBC, but I won't go into detail about it. But if you ever watch your bird feeders for 30 minutes and you count every bird that shows up on your bird feeders individually, you're going to end up with 47 chickadees, 120 titmice and all that, when there's really just 6 or 7 just popping back and forth all day. And so there is a certain protocol where you count the maximum number of a species at one time on and around the feeders. Like, for example, in the winter, for me, at the end of the day, I can literally count 36 cardinals on my feeders, on the ground beneath my feeders, and in the trees surrounding or at the edge by the feeders. And of course, for cardinals, it's you have an extra edge of being able to differentiate the males from the female birds. But chickadees and titmice and blue jays and stuff, obviously, you really can't. So, but if anyone has any questions about the specific protocol, I can send that to you. Yeah. Another thing about CBCs, and some of you may recognize this bird because it was on Little Talbot Island a few years ago, and this is where the picture was taken. Documenting a rarity. And on the Christmas bird count, like I mentioned before, it's critical that people document that on the day of the count. And the reason, as I mentioned, is that memories fail. And what I see sometimes in Kentucky when I get people delaying a little bit is I get plagiarized extended quotes from Sibley and Ken Kaufman and All About Birds websites. So it's just important to document what you see, describing the bird. And what I mean when I say that is looking at this bird here, describing it, parrot-like bill, semi-glossy black, all black plumage, black eye, long tail. Another aspect of describing the bird is, why isn't it a boat-tailed grackle? Why isn't it a common grackle? Some of those things, but that it's on, it's on a branch and it flew up across the road might be helpful to people who are chasing the bird. But from where I sit, that's not going to help me who didn't see the bird get convinced that you did. So photos and audios are definitely a benefit. And with digital photography, so many people now have good equipment and their smartphones can capture audio. It's definitely, if you see anything rare, that's a big benefit. I already said rule out similar species. So field notes is another thing that's important to do. One thing that I recommend to people, and I've apparently it's not something that people have thought of very much, but pretty much every smartphone has a voice recorder app. And what I would admonish you to consider is, if you're out and you're seeing a rare bird, have somebody turn on the voice recorder app so you can real time make contemporaneous audio notes describing what the bird looks like, so that when you fill out the form, you've got a soundtrack, you've got a description with you speaking it in real time based on your observations. So think about that and practice on your phone. Look. There's a million of them, but anyway. So there's the rare bird form. Elizabeth, I see your hand up. Just give me a moment, if you would, please. There's a rare bird form is something that Bill Prantey and Bruce Anderson have required for a lot of the rare birds. I'm going to try to work with them about that, because this bird on your screen, the smooth-billed Ani, if you have a good photograph of it, I'm not convinced that a form is necessary. Now, they may demand it, and that's their right. They're the regional editors. If this was in Kentucky and I saw this photograph, I wouldn't necessarily need a form. I would tell the person who observed it that submitting a form to the State Bird Record Committee is an important step that needs to be taken, which does require a form. Then there. But so as it stands now, forms are expected, and I'll be distributing to the section leaders the updated form. And as I said before, to submit this on count day is an important thing, so that we're not relying on memory. Oops. So Elizabeth, you have a question?
It actually wasn't my question. It was Deb. Deb's out there. She had a question.
think I responded to it in the chat, but her question was something about, are you saying that not everybody is welcome to participate in the bird count? I think after you said that we had established section leaders, and I responded, we're not saying that at all.
Oh gosh, no. No,
No, you were saying that you wanted people who were experienced.
Right.
And I've been trying to join the CBC for many years, and the person who ran it before did not want inexperienced people.
All right, let me allow me to be clear. I want anybody and everybody to have fun on the CBC and to participate. That's it. There's a period at the end of that sentence.
Thank you.
When I said experienced, I was talking about the offshore one. I was specifically, if I recall correctly, I was talking at that moment about going offshore in a boat where it's tricky to identify some of the pelagic species, and so that's when I mentioned that. I absolutely encourage new birders to come along. I will say that that because it's a Christmas bird count, new birders have to agree that they're not going to get frustrated if we can't savor a bird for 10 minutes or whatever, even if you're getting great photographs, because for a CBC,
Right.
there's
You misunderstand. I'm not a new birder.
right,
But I was new to the CBC and was told I was not wanted because I hadn't done a CBC before. So I'm a little sensitive on the subject. I have signed up to go with Deb Hill, but I just wanted to clarify because I've been waiting for years to do a CBC here.
well, good, and I hope that you don't have to. I'm happy that you're on board. And
Yeah, I'm going to do 2 of them. I'm doing the one here in Jacksonville and one in St. Augustine with Deb.
good.
And so I'm very excited because, like I
That's
said,
amazing, Deb. I'm glad you put your question out there. That's amazing. Nice to meet you. I don't think I
Thank
met
you.
you. It's Elizabeth.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Yeah. So I think it's critical that when I was a kid, I was a new birder, and I participated in CBCs way back in the day. My job at that time was to hold the clipboard and write down everything that Dr. Lofton said, or Peggy Powell said, or some of the other legacy members, let's say, of Duval Audubon. And the benefit to me was, as a young birder, as a new-ish birder, I really got familiar with the taxonomic sequence, because I had to find those birds as they were being rattled off to me. And so I figured out fairly quickly, where to go on the list. But as far as younger birders are concerned, I'm not getting any younger. I don't know about any of you guys, but we have to pass the torch, and we have to cultivate what I refer to as bench strength, or have succession planning. If any of you have a corporate experience, succession planning for how we're going to, make sure that the Jacksonville Christmas bird count is strong going forward. And it's going to be in the hands of those young birders who are racking up species on the eBird Top 100 in Duval County for the year and for life. So cultivating that talent, cultivating the enthusiasm for and love of Christmas bird counts is paramount. And anything you guys can do to help facilitate that among peers, colleagues, friends is definitely appreciated. So,
Well, I just want to say, I don't really know 100%, but I'm pretty sure William, who's my friend and a great birder, he's on the call. He's probably our youngest, right, everybody? Just a shout out to William. I know you're out there.
yeah, I had a conversation with him because
You did?
I did, because I looked at the top 100 and I said, who isn't on the list of participants from last year? And I looked and I saw his profile there in eBird and said, well, he's younger than me. So I sent him a note and said, hey man, let's get you on board. And so I'm happy that he's here. So okay, so I'm glad for that clarification, because I want to, all doors are open, and that there's a there's a saying on the Birdability website that birding is for everybody. And I mean that too. If you can't see, you can't hear, you can't walk around much, we still want you on board. You can still help us detect birds in the way that you can. So anyway, let me just keep going. We'll have more time for questions. I just want to get moving on. You mentioned working, I think Deb mentioned some other CBCs, and I want to point out that the ones nearest to Jacksonville, there's Clay County, and there's St. Augustine and Matanzas and Flagler down here. An important one that Pat Murphy helped me with. Pat told me that the Okefenokee CBC hadn't been done in 5 years, and I was astounded. I didn't know that, so I talked to my peer in Georgia, who's the regional editor, and asked him, how can we get this thing going? I called some people in the National Wildlife Refuge office there at Okefenokee, and suffice it to say that that the Okefenokee CBC is back on track, needs people. I haven't heard definitively, the one over here by St. Mary's is the Cumberland Island one. I haven't heard definitively whether that's a go, but it's definitely in the works as well. So we want you to do Jacksonville, yes, but if you've got some bandwidth to do some of these other regional ones, if you go to I sent everybody a link to this website, which has all of the maps, count circles on a map. You click on that, the center point, and you get the contact information for the compiler. And if they've set the date, you can get the date as well. So you can plan your counts during the holidays. So what do we need? And I've said some of this, so this one might be a little quicker. If you can think of anybody who's willing to do CBC stuff on a boat, offshore or in the estuaries and tidal creeks and whatnot, please let me know, because I think we're missing some good numbers and maybe even some species by limiting ourselves to land and boat docks. So if that's possible, I'm interested to see if we can't. We used to have several boats every year covering parts of the count circle, and I don't know that we really have that now. So I know that there's a big issue is that it costs money to put gas in your boat and go, and we are asking people with the kindness of their hearts to do that with us and for us. We need experienced birders to help. And again, this is not in any way excluding non-experienced birders, but it is that the experienced birders would be willing to be there to help coach and point out things and give identification tips. And I think more experienced birders are less shy about pitching in front of other people, because your lips look kind of funny when you're pitching, and maybe they're a little self-conscious. Yeah. Another thing that's useful, but I want to make clear is not mandatory, is that if you're leading a party in one of the sections, it's a lot easier if you are using eBird and trip reports. Again, I'm not a stickler. I know how to use them, and I advocate for their use because I think that they're very helpful. That's people who aren't afraid of those tools are definitely helpful. Newer birders. I've already talked about newer birders. We need to keep the culture of CBC going. Younger participants to whom we will pass the torch. William and others. It used to be a Duval had a Junior Audubon Society. I think that I think tort reform and liability and insurance policies sort of prevent that these days, but that's really how I got started. I quit the Boy Scouts because I learned that there was a Junior Audubon, and I never looked back from Boy Scouts once I found Junior Audubon, because we went on camping trips and stuff like this. And there are still people that I'm in touch with today from back in those days. So anyway. All right, so that's the bit on Christmas bird counting. The next up is the eBird trip reports, brief overview, and the eBird hotspots website. This is my email address. I've included that in the links that Pete's going to distribute as well. In the interest of time, are there questions? What questions do you have that we can take a couple of questions in between now that CBCs are fresh on your minds?
I'd like to say I posted the links in the chat, so they're available there. And then if I have a way to email all the participants the links, I can do that too. But I should have hopefully have your emails, or you can leave them for me in the chat.
Okay. All right. Well, I have time after for questions as well. So the next thing then we're going to talk about is eBird trip reports. And I'm hoping that you can see my my trip report here. It should say KYLO Zoo Parks. Let me.
Not seeing that.
Okay, just.
Yes.
Okay. So this is a trip report. Again, some of you may be familiar with trip reports. Essentially what their purpose is to sort of gather together in one report a series of eBird checklists. And so for example, if you go on a trip to Southeast Arizona for, X number of days, you can create a trip report so all your checklists show up there in the one report. So in this blue square, what you have is the name of, you named the trip report. And so KYLO is the Louisville Christmas bird count, and Zoo Parks is the section that I cover inside. And it has the date, and it has the county and participants. That's what's in this blue section. Now, if you look over here at the map, you can see all the pins of where the checklists are, and the red pins are eBird hotspots, and the blue pins are personal locations. And I'm not going to get into detail about that distinction, but suffice it to say that this is where all of our birding was done in my section, which runs from the river here all the way down toward the Louisville Zoo and a couple peripheral. There's some cemeteries and some other spots in this area. So what it'll do is it'll gather, I had 3 parties. I had one party, Christine Hayden was the second party, and Sean Ward was the third party. And we all covered different spots, but all of the work that we did came together in this one report. And I'm going to move this up just a little bit so you can see. So it's this default, the default is that everybody's checklist shows. So altogether, we had 52 species. Altogether, we had 13 checklists and 4 species with photos. One of the good things is that if I want to see the list of checklists, I just click this box, and then here's all 13 of the checklists. And if I want to see everybody's pictures, which a lot of people really enjoy, is, hey, I just want to see the pictures that you got. Well, you can sort of see that we had, it's rendering pretty, sapsucker, kestrel, robin, including one taking a fun bath, and fox sparrow. And so it's a nice way and an easy way for you to show off your photos and share those. So the other part is there's a narrative section, and for a Christmas bird count, one of the important things is that each section needs to tell me how many hours were you on foot, how many hours you in a car or other mode of transportation, and the miles, etc. When you started, when you stopped, how many parties were involved, how many observers across all 3 of those parties, how much time you spent owling, and whether you were at feeders. I had an extra E in there. I didn't notice that till now. So, so this is a trip report. And one of the other things you can use, you can filter the trip report so you can see all of Christine's birds. So you can see Christine had 34 species on 4 checklists. And you can see the pins where she was pretty much, in the zoo area, Joe Creason and the zoo area, right? And if I want to see what Sean did, I just select data for Sean, and he did 3 checklists in this sort of line here by Bellarmine and an incidental list down here by the highway. And then of course I did the rest of the stuff. Anyway, so it's just a nice tool to have. Now, one of the things that I do with trip reports on the Christmas bird count is I monitor all 9 trip reports. So around midday, I'll take a species list and I'll go down the species list and check off everything that everybody has seen. So I'll check off, in this example, Canada goose, mallard, rock pigeon, mourning dove, etc., all the way down the list, so that it'll reveal what we're missing. And around midday, I'll send a note to the section leaders to say, hey, we don't have any shorebirds, or we need more sparrows, so that in the afternoon, the section leaders and the parties that are still out in the field will be sort of more thinking about, okay, let's make sure we cover some habitat that's going to get some of the missing species. So there are a couple of other things that, and like I said, I don't want to get into too much detail, but let me. Okay, yeah, all right. One of the so I want to talk briefly about how you create a trip report. So it's pretty easy. If you go into, let me move this over. If you go into My eBird you can do this on your phone as well, but you have to do it on the browser. In the My eBird section I'm hoping everybody's familiar with this website, but if you look under the Manage My section in the blue pane on the left, you can see Manage My Trip Reports. And so you can create a trip report. It's just clicking a button. You can give it a name. So I'll just call this Test Duval Audubon. And let's just, now you can do this for any date in the future, but you can also do it for dates in the past. And what I would ask you to do, if you really want to get to know trip reports, just play with them. You can delete them after you finish experimenting on them, because they don't affect your actual eBird checklists or anybody else's. They're just a tool to sort of pull all the data together into one format. But try, putting, so let's just say this upcoming weekend, I want to go to, I'm going to go birding in Duval. So I'm going to set the 22nd to say the 24th, right? And it defaults at midnight start time to almost midnight end time. So you can change these. So if I know that on Friday I have to work till 6 o'clock, I'm just going to change this to 6 p.m. And then I know that on Sunday, I'm going to be driving home in the dark. So there's really not any point in having anything after, 6 o'clock p.m. or actually, let's just leave it there. And so you can sort of narrow the time. And what this does is every checklist that you submit in between the Friday, November 22nd at 6 p.m. through, this would be owling, right? Through 6 p.m. on Sunday, the 24th, are going to show up on this trip report. So a couple other things. You can set visibility settings. One is public, and people who do Duval field trips, for example, might choose to have the public setting where people can go online and look and find those trip reports. We'll talk about how to do that in a second. There's link only, where it's sort of only people who have the link to your trip report are going to be able to see it. And then there's limited, is only the people who actually are in the trip report can see it. So you have the prerogative to select the visibility or lack thereof. I usually use link only for the work that I do. But then what you do is you create the trip report, which is the green button down at the bottom. And then there's another, and this is the part that people forget sometimes. There's another green button that says Save and View Trip Report. So I've done that. And now you can see, yay, your trip report exists. You've got the name, you've got the date, I'm the guy who built it, so I can invite people to join. So for example, if me and Pete are going to go do some birding this weekend, what I can do is, so up here, when you first create it, it says your trip report exists. If others were part of this report, add them now. So you can click add people, and then you can use their username or their email address. And I don't know what Pete's is, but I'm just going to say, let's say it's Pete Birder. And in all of your contacts, you see I'm scrolling through this list of names. These are all people that I've had shared checklists with in the past, and it's on my account. And so I can choose whether Pete is going to be a commenter or an editor, and then I can send a message, just a test trip report here or whatever, hey, this is for the weekend at, whatever. And then I'll just click invite. Now I think this is probably going to fail. Oh, maybe Pete Birder is, oh my gosh, there is somebody named Pete Birder. I don't know who Peter Scott is. Oops. Well, he's gonna see that it's a test, right? But another thing is that I've sent the invitation, and you can see here that Pete is invited, right? And when Pete goes into his email, and I'll show you what that looks like in a moment, until Pete accepts the invitation, it's still gonna say invited. So how do you do that? I ask. Oh, I will tell you. Oh, by the way, and then at this point, you need to click done, which is another green button down at the bottom. Okay, so I want to show you what the email looks like. So this email right here, KOS Field Trips, is I created a trip report to Finca El Placer in Caldas, Colombia. Why did I pick that? One of the other links that I included was a link that is in the notes called Summer Tanager 153. And it's just a complete sidebar, but I'm so jazzed about it. Up here in Kentucky, in a state park about 15 minutes from here, I saw a summer tanager this summer with a radio tag on it. And I called my friends at Fish and Wildlife. They brought their receiver and figured out that it was summer tanager number 153. And it turns out that summer tanager 153 was banded at Finca El Placer in Caldas, Colombia in February of this year. And they were thrilled. This was a bird-friendly coffee farm. And this summer tanager was the first one that was detected in the US on its breeding territory of all the thousands of birds that they've ever banded. And so
That's awesome. That's so great.
Yeah.
I had to interrupt James.
Oh, yeah. So I included a link to a short video that the researchers put together at the Smithsonian about this issue, about the bird. Anyway, so back to this. You'll see that the person who sent you the trip report request is going to be right here via eBird is the from. So make sure you look for that. And then it'll have the location, the dates. To accept this trip report, click on the link below. All right, so I'm going to go ahead. This is what you have to do when someone invites you to a trip report. You get this email, you open it, you click this link, and it's going to get you to this trip report. It says you have been invited to join this trip report. You're not done. Up in the upper right, you see this button, Join Trip Report? You have to click it. So I'm going to click Join Trip Report. And then it comes to you managing your checklist. Let me talk just a minute about this. If this trip report was created for the past, then there would already be all of my checklists that fit within the window of time set by the trip report. In this case, it's future, February 23 to March 1 of next year, because that's the window within which the bird was banded in Columbia last year, or this year. So I don't have any checklists to manage, but you have to, down at the bottom, save and view the trip report. So I've clicked that, and there. Now you can see that in this blue pane on the left, my name is now on there. So again, you receive the email, you open the email, you click the link to join, you click the join button. I know that they made this a little bit more difficult than it needs to be, but please be patient. And then you have to save, after you've joined, you have to save to view the trip report. So anyway, this is, that's basically it. Now, I will say another one or two things before we move on, because I'm looking at the time and I want to, I know I'm talking a lot. So if you look at the edit button over here, you can manage your checklist. What this allows you to do is, if you have, if I have a checklist that I did on my way to the airport the day I was flying to Columbia, it might show up on the trip report because I'm in this trip report, and I want to make sure that I can unselect that. So if I go to manage checklists, all of my checklists will be here. If I see one that's on my way to the airport here in Kentucky, I will deselect that list. And so that it's not included in the trip report, because who wants to see Kentucky birds in a Columbia trip report? Nobody. That's who. And you can also manage the people. If you own the trip report, you can invite different people. You can remove people by clicking the trash can, but you have to be an editor to do that. So again, I don't want to get into too much detail here, because I really just think that if you spend a couple of minutes with the trip report, create one for some birding you're going to do this week or this weekend, and just play around with it. Have some people that you go birding with join it, and just see what it's like to do it. And then you'll start seeing the photographs that you do and whatnot. You can also try one from the past, like if you did go to some cool trip that you took, you can certainly set the dates and all of your checklists will show up there. So that, I think, is all. Well, we're going to have a, there's two other things real quick. We're going to have a deep dive on trip reports for Christmas bird counts for the section leaders. Pete's going to schedule that or get that on the books, in a couple of weeks, so that we can really focus on how to manage trip reports for the Christmas bird count, which is more of a workshop type thing. But there's one last thing that I want to point out, that if you want to see other people's trip reports, if you're in eBird and you go to the Explore tab, and let's just take a look at Duval. So you're familiar with, when you look at Duval, you see this is the default page. Over on the left, you can see Duval trip reports. And then these are all the public trip reports that have been submitted. I didn't know, a lot of people don't know that this is there, but here's all the public. Here's the Global Big Day one. Kate and Jessica did one. Sue and Amber did one for Huguenot and Fort George, etc. So Duval CBC Hexter Drive, Tim Aiken did that. So you can look up what other people are doing and you can see their photos and all that kind of stuff. So it's a fun thing. So what questions do you have about trip reports?
James, so these trip reports are ones that the owners made public, right? They're not.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And only those.
Yeah. Because I know I've done some trip reports that aren't showing up on there.
Yeah. Laura's hand is up.
Yeah, I just want to confirm, at the very beginning, you said that you have to use a browser to get all of this initiated. So in other words, a browser, not your eBird app.
You know what? I don't think you could do it on the eBird app. But I normally don't. I'm pulling it up right now, and I don't think you can on the app. I don't see anywhere.
It's much easier on the browser.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was my point. I just want to make sure others kind of understood. I think that's been a little bit of a problem sometimes in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing is, though, with for the CBC anyway, when we have that meeting, we're gonna set everything up for the CBC by that meeting. You can set them up today for a trip you're going to take next year. So it'll just be there waiting for you, and it'll populate whenever checklists start flowing in to that time window that you set. So Pete, I don't know, are there any other questions in the chat?
I'm checking right now. I don't see any new questions.
Okay. Let me, in the interest of time, because I want to make sure that I don't overstay my welcome. I want to talk about a website that I absolutely love. I learned about it a couple of years ago up here. A friend of mine, Ken Ostermiller in Ohio, created a website called Birding Hotspots. And I'm going to ask you all rhetorically, how many of you have gone on a day of just wandering around Florida just to see where you end up and all this, and the only thing you really have to go on is eBird hotspot pages where you have a list of birds and you can filter it down to the season, the month, or whatever, but that's all you have is what birds are there or not. And you wonder, well, gosh, I wonder, if there's my friend is in a wheelchair, are there paths that person can use? Is there lighting? Are there restroom facilities? Are there cut paths? Is there, parking? You don't know. eBird is not set up, and its purpose isn't for that. But if any of you have ever said, man, I sure wish, I'm planning a trip to see my niece in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and I don't know anything about the hotspots there. Well, this is the answer to that. I will say first, one of the first things I want to say, it's 100% for birders, by birders, non-commercial, no stupid pop-ups or stupid ads at all. It's just birding stuff. And what I'm asking you to consider is, after the meeting, go to the page for your favorite hotspot and see if there's any information in there. And if there's not, you're the one who knows more about that eBird hotspot than I do. And you can help out your fellow birders, whether they're travelers coming down to Florida for the holidays or any other time, or there any other birding tourists coming down to see the gray gull somewhere. So this is the Duval County page. And if I'm coming down to Duval County and I've never been there before, I see this, 167 hotspots here. I can pretty much figure out that the orange ones have more species than the gray ones. I can scroll down a little bit and I see that there's some top hotspots. And one of the first ones, 279 species, is Huguenot Park. Let's click on that and see what the page looks like for Huguenot Park, shall we? Well, it looks like I've got a photograph of the entrance, so that if I'm coming from, Mississauga, and I see, I'm driving up Heckscher and I see that place, I've seen that picture before. Oh, good. What's the other picture? Oh, it's the entrance. There's a pay, entrance gate. Okay. But if you scroll down a little bit, you see there's a map that you can switch to satellite view, so you can sort of see what the lay of the land looks like. You can see that beautiful little hook there and the lagoon. Tips for birding is a section. I'm not going to read it to you, but it's got a section on tips for birding. And I actually wrote most of this, if not all of this. I mentioned that you need scopes, and that, if you better bring a shovel in case you get stuck, or a couple $20 bills in case you need to have somebody help pull you out, and you shouldn't expect them to do it for nothing. Birds of interests, things like winter gulls, waterfowl, etc. All the cool birds that Huguenot, you live there. About this location, and I'll talk about how there's always fishers, there's always lots of sunbathers, there's driving on the beach, but you got to be careful not to run over kids or royal tern and laughing gull chicks. Never enter the dunes area is another admonishment that I have on it. This is where you can put all the cool stuff. If there's cordoned off sections seasonally for the nesting birds, or for sea turtle nesting, or any other important thing that you think that non-local people need to know, or even local people need to know, you can add that information. I'll show you how in a minute. You can check whether there's restrooms on site, whether there's roadside viewing, meaning you can stay in your car and just sort of bird along an impoundment or some sort of route, like the Black Point Wildlife Drive in Merritt Island, for example, is roadside viewing. Whether there's an entrance fee or whether there's wheelchair accessible trails, I will ask that you do this. Go to your favorite hotspot page. 100% of the eBird hotspots in Florida and the US and most of the world are in this website. It's automatically programmed to pull it in. So if I go to let's just jump out for just a minute. Let's find
James, it's Elizabeth. I had my hand up for a quick question. While
Sure.
we're still Huguenot, who polices the content? Like, is it you?
yes.
Who polices the content?
So there's several Florida people who are editors. I'm one of them. And so what I was going to show you how to actually make suggestions. And then what happens is that you fill out a form, and then one of the editors will review it and reserve the right for light editing, I have to say, and publish it. This is not, we can add links to the site. Let me show you another example.
Let me tell you why I was asking, and then you could shut me down. I would love to put something in there that says, hey, we do bird stewarding there. If anybody wants to be a bird steward, you know what I mean? I don't know if that's appropriate for this site.
Anything that will advance bird education, bird knowledge, experiential stuff for kids and adults and people, and what are things to tell people about seasonal restrictions. Like I said, in the Huguenot one, I tell people, you may get stuck, so don't be stupid. And if you do get stuck and you insist on driving your Ford Fiesta in loose sand, make sure you have a shovel or a couple $20 bills, because you're going to need it, because the staff doesn't have the capacity to rescue you from making bad decisions. So let's take a look real quick. I want to show you.
Thank you.
You're certainly welcome. Let's see. Crosby Sanctuary. Let's look at that. Oh, wow. Look at this. You've got the same kind of thing. You've got the map. You've got tips for birding about this location. There's the Duval website. Let's see. Content from Pete Johnson. So Pete was the one who input some of this stuff. But let's say you want to add something. If you go to suggest edit, now you're not going to have edit hotspot. I'm an editor, so I do. So you're not going to see that link. So let's click suggest edit. Essentially, you'll put in your name and email if you want. you don't have to, but it's easier if I've got questions about the stewardship program, and I want to make sure I get the right link or whatever, you can do that, but it's not required. You can edit what's here. You can add, additional stuff below. I'm going to get rid of that because you just sort of type what's in here. So tips for birding is really just that. What do you need for birding tips? What are some cool birds that are seen there? Now, keep in mind, every one of these pages has direct links to that hotspots page in eBird. So it's just one click away to see the species list, recent checklist, media, and all that good stuff that's in eBird. It takes you to eBird. So you've got that direct thing. We're working with eBird to get a revert link. You have to use your back button to get back to this website. We're hoping eBird will build in a back to eBird hotspots page in their platform. I'm not holding my breath, but we're asking. About this location, you see here, Pete's got the information about public access. If that ever changes, if you go in and you make those changes, or if you just want to make a note to the editor, and then you submit the suggestion. So I'll get a notification that there's new content to review on this particular website, on this particular one. So that's a way to contribute. And again, it's totally crowdsourced, and anybody who wants to help out their fellow birders based on the hotspot that they know and love more than anybody else, this is a perfect way to share that experience and such. There's also a chance to upload photos. And what we're usually looking for in terms of the photos isn't your cool bird photos, but it's things like, here's where you park, here's some trail signs, here's a particular feature that a bird blind, for example, or a water feature, so that people will know what to look for when they're on the ground in that area. It's a lot easier if you've already seen the place. Like if you're traveling for business and you're going to go to an office that you've never visited, and your host, the person who's going to receive you, sends a picture of them so you know what their face looks like. It's kind of a similar sort of courtesy that here's some things that, like the entrance of Huguenot, for example. So that's the Birding Hotspots website, and I hope that you will all consider contributing to it. It's like I said, it's for birders by birders, no commercial. No one's going to ask you for money, and no one's going to have to sit through stupid commercials or ads or anything. So that's it. I took longer than I thought I was going to take, but I'm passionate about this stuff, and I don't know when to shut up sometimes. So what questions do you have about this product or this site?
Looks like I need to do some updating on Crosby.
Well, it's and it will change it as often as you see fit.
We've made the garden area look much better than it looks in those pictures.
I imagine there's stuff grown up a little bit too.
Yeah. Oh, there's more pictures. Okay. I didn't know those were in there.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing because I am done. We still have, there's still people here. Oh, good. I didn't run everybody off. And there's even a cat here too, Laura's cat. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I've somehow the links that are in the chat, and I'd encourage you to take a look at some of those links. You can copy and paste, I presume, copy and paste the whole set into your onto your desktop somewhere, and be able to use them. And there's ones to see the Christmas bird count circles on the Audubon map. There's a couple on how to use trip reports, how to use eBird during the Christmas bird counts. There's a little bit on my summer tanager. There's the birding hotspots website. It's linked to the Duval County page, but you can navigate all over the planet on that. So that's it. I talk a lot, don't I?
You're a good communicator. We appreciate you, James.
Well, I would love to answer any questions if anyone has any others. Otherwise, I'm going to hand it back to you, Pete.
Okay. Well, thank you again, James. That was an excellent presentation. And like he said, we're going to set up in a few weeks a section leader trip report kind of section leader meeting, go over trip reports, whatever else we need to talk about. So keep an eye out on your emails for that invite coming soon.
I'll also say that it's section leaders +1, because some of the section leaders may have their favorite technology people in their sections that might be wanting to join, the ones who sort of do the eBird checklist for the team. And so, yeah.
Hey, I don't see the link for the birding hotspot, guys. Is it in there? I see the one for, oh, never mind. It's right above the summer tanker. Gotcha. Super. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll try to send those links out as well via email. Hopefully they transfer or copy and paste and still work once from the chat, but I'll try to email them out too.
Yeah, and my email's in there too. So I think the way it should work is if you click that, your email application will launch with a new message with my email in it. That's typically how the mail to links work.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and I'll do my best to answer if people email me individually. I've got I got a lot on my plate, but you know, I really care about this stuff. That's why I'm here, and so I'll do my best to be prompt with my communication.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, James. We know you're a busy guy with all the different projects you're involved in, and regional editor or regional CBC person. That's huge.
You know, there's a couple of other, I mean, like I mentioned, there's some of the historical projects that I thought I might mention. For decades, Dr. Lofton had a winter bird survey that he did 10 visits per winter at Huguenot. And I think a lot of those records were destroyed, but I'm trying to find them so I can enter them as eBird checklists. And I'm also doing one with the historical rare bird reports from the Christmas bird counts. Pete, you and I have talked about that. So we're going to be entering some of those as eBird checklists where appropriate. But so it's
Cool.
Labor of love.
All right. Well, getting kind of late, so unless anybody else has any more questions or thoughts or concerns, speak now or forever hold your peace. All right.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yep.
Gobble gobble.
Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful night. I'll see you all soon.
Okay,
for the
bye-bye.
CBC.
Bye, guys.
Take care.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
That went well, James.
Well, good. I hope so. I hope so. I know that some people had to drop off, but you know, I just love this stuff.
Who's Susan Marino? Is she still listening to us?
I
Maybe
don't recognize. Yeah,
She probably walked away from her computer.
yeah, maybe so.
Hi, no, this is Sue Marino. I'm new to this. It's my first meeting with you guys, and so I'm flipping through my computer here, trying to figure out how to turn it off.
Well, welcome,
At the
Sue.
bottom, yeah, at the bottom there's a leave button. It looks like an icon of a person exiting a red door. Should be to the lower right on your screen.
Yeah, mine says end.
I'll just shut it off. Thank you.
Have a good day. Thanks.
You too.
Anyway, yeah, so I think yours said end because of the recording, probably.
Oh, I got to stop recording.